Hey guys, tonight we dive into the disturbing life of pharaohs in ancient Egypt. You trudge through dusty corridors lit by flickering oil lamps, and suddenly you realize you probably won't survive this royal drama. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in a tent, draped with gold-threaded linen, every breath heavy with incense and dread. From the moment of their birth, pharaohs were more myth than mortal, declared incarnations of Horus, the falcon-headed god, before they even drew a cry. Mainstream fact: Egyptian kings were considered divine offspring. Their births were announced with trumpets and temple chants. A midwife would clutch a handful of natron salt, whispering protective spells, because who wouldn't want a little chemical preservation at breakfast? In those first, trembling moments, the placenta was buried beneath the temple foundation. A quirky ritual, echoing the belief that the new ruler's life force would anchor the building forever. Historians still argue whether the placenta burial actually strengthened royal authority or was simply a convenient way to hide messy leftovers. Either way, the newborn lay swaddled in bark cloth, watched by priests who debated fervently which god truly claimed paternity. You can almost hear them arguing, "It's Ra, no you fool. He's still hungover from last night's sacrifice." Your crib is a miniature throne, carved from acacia wood, its legs ending in lion's paws that seem ready to pounce. A servant prods you awake at dawn to recite your divine pedigree. Imagine being tested before breakfast. Joke 1. If only Pharaoh knew that someday his biggest challenge would be remembering all his many names. By age 5, you're already attending lessons in hieroglyphics, arithmetic, and theology, because preschool in ancient Thebes is no joke. Well, actually it is, but you get the idea. Protective amulets hang around your neck. Crocodile-dung sunscreen might smell foul, but hey, it keeps the sunburn at bay. Quirky tidbit: some royal children wore miniature scarab beetle charms, carved from turquoise, to repel scorpions. Modern asides aside, this is serious business. Surviving the Nile sun meant mastering mystical chemistry before you could walk. By age 7, tutors quiz you on divine law and palace etiquette. Your favorite instructor, a wizened scribe who claims to channel Thoth's wisdom during lessons, although you suspect he just really likes telling dad jokes about ibis birds. Joke 2. He once tried to teach you multiplication by stacking jars of grain. You nearly toppled the entire lesson literally. An uneasy hush falls when priests debate which temple you'll patronize, Karnak or Luxor, and whether your image should face east to greet the rising sun or west toward the land of the dead. Historians still argue whether orientation impacted the pharaoh's spiritual journey or was pure ritual theater. Meanwhile, you're just trying not to trip over your linen tunic. By nightfall, you're escorted to a moonlit ritual, where incense smoke coils like restless spirits. Chanting priests hover around a gilded cradle, brandishing papyrus scrolls filled with warnings. Beware the serpent in your dreams. Open scholarly debate. Did these omens truly guide Pharaoh's destinies? Or were they elaborate PR stunts to impress foreign dignitaries? As you drift off under a canopy painted with stars, you realize this divine birth mystique is both a blessing and a burden. You're destined to rule an empire, yet every prophecy, every ritual, every bizarre superstition dances on the edge of absurdity. Joke 3. At least you don't have to worry about sibling rivalry. Yet Your siblings are still busy plotting how to pinch your royal sandals. You trudge into the heart of the palace at dawn. The marble floors cool beneath your sandals as tutors await your arrival. By age 8, you're already more disciplined than a modern CEO. Mainstream fact: Egyptian princes began formal education around 7, studying hieroglyphs, mathematics, and religious rites under the palace's senior scribes. Protective priests still argue over whether your first tutor should be a priest of Amun or an official from the treasury. Historians still argue whether that choice shaped a pharaoh's political leanings or was merely ceremonial theater. Your morning begins with the recitation of divine law. I am the living Horus chosen of Ra. Before you even sip your porridge, which tastes faintly of date honey and ash because someone thought adding charcoal was a detox. Quirky tidbit: royal children sometimes soak their porridge in goat's milk, fermented with breadcrumbs to boost vitality, though you suspect it just gave everyone gas. Joke 1. Nothing bonds a royal household faster than synchronized burping. Next comes physical training in the palace courtyard. A pair of bodyguards coach you through archery, because nothing screams divine ruler like shooting arrows off a chariot at sunrise. Mainstream fact: pharaohs were expected to prove their prowess in archery and chariotry as symbols of martial virtue. You fumble your chariot reins, nearly careening into a sacred obelisk. Remember that time you almost flattened the priest's lunch cart? A perfect callback to your earlier bench pressing the Ice Age. Except here, you're bench pressing ostrich feathers into the dirt. Joke 2. At least you didn't squash any nobles yet. After training, you pause under the shade of a sycamore tree, where your physician examines you for divine ailments. You still wear that crocodile-dung sunscreen, classy if somewhat pungent, but it allegedly wards off more than sunburn. Historians still argue whether those crude emulsions actually offered UV protection or simply masked the smell of the royal latrines. Quirky tidbit: some physicians prescribed ground beetles mixed with honey to enhance memory, a remedy, you swear, made your tongue itch for days. By mid-morning, you're escorted to the Hall of Propaganda, where ivory reliefs depict your ancestors slaying giants and parting seas. You're instructed to memorize each lineage claim. Because credit where credit's due, your tutor quips. Joke 3. Who knew family trees could be so dramatic? And here, you thought your cousin Sneferu's claim to fame was inventing the first true pyramid, only to discover he just made a wonky step pyramid and called it a modern marvel. At noon, a lavish feast awaits: lentil stew, roasted duck, and honeyed figs, served on silver platters. But before you indulge, you must sprinkle a handful of barley grains onto the priest's altar. To honor the gods, a mainstream fact: ritual offerings maintained divine favor and were central to royal ceremonies. You wonder if the gods prefer grapes to barley. Historians still argue whether pharaohs tailored offerings to deities' supposed tastes or simply reused leftovers. Your tutors then lead you to a mirrored chamber, lined with bronze plates. Your reflection catches your eye, but feels as distant as the Sphinx. Quirky tidbit: royals used polished bronze mirrors to practice expressions for official portraits. Think ancient selfies minus the duck face. You practice your best, a stoic god-king look until your cheekbones ache. As afternoon shadows lengthen, you're schooled in statecraft. A tall vizier quizzes you on tax reforms. Would you raise grain levies on Upper Egypt or invest in Nile dredging? Mainstream fact: pharaohs held weekly councils with officials to debate governance, reinforcing their role as supreme judges. Your vizier leans in, whispering, remember the peasants need just enough bread to live, but not enough to revolt. You nod gravely, trying not to giggle. Physical exhaustion sets in. By late afternoon, your limbs are heavy from lessons and rituals. A fragrant breeze carries the distant croak of temple frogs, lulling your mind toward sleep. Yet you steel yourself for evening ceremonies where priests will seal your daily accomplishments with votive offerings. You recall that first night placenta burial this time. It feels oddly comforting to see how far you've come. As the sun dips below the western horizon, you realize that your upbringing is both privileged and burdensome. Every lesson, every recipe for fermented porridge, and every archery mishap is a step toward the throne and toward a destiny nobody truly understands. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of both silk-lined cushions and ancestral expectations, wondering if any future pharaoh ever felt this exhausted by childhood. You slip through sandstone columns into the temple of Amun at first light, the air thick with incense and murmured prayers. Here, pharaohs weren't just rulers. They were living oracles, channels between mortals and gods. Mainstream fact, Egyptian monarchs performed regular oracular ceremonies, consulting priests and casting lots to interpret the divine will. You stand before a low altar, eyes closed, heart drumming as priests begin the chant of Unos's pyramid texts, hoping to coax a clear message from beyond. A pair of masked priests flanks you, each gripping a carved sistrum, a rattling ritual instrument meant to awaken the gods. Quirky tidbit: some shrines featured tiny mechanical birds that sang when winds blew through hidden pipes, convincing believers that actual divine messengers had arrived. You can almost feel the flapping wings, though historians still argue whether those automata were used sincerely or as stage props to bolster pharaonic prestige. Your lips part, reciting a liturgy meant to summon Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe god. The temple walls echo your words, "O Thoth, grant me the sight of the hidden path." Suddenly, a soothsayer hands you a clay tablet inscribed with a labyrinthine maze of dots, each mark representing a possible future. You must trace a line through the maze with holy water, believing the exit you draw reveals your next victory or downfall. Joke 1. It's like ancient connect the dots. Except you might end up invading the wrong province. A hush falls as the priests interpret your pattern. The gods foresee strife at dawn, one intones. You raise an eyebrow thinking, "Great, another sunrise with curse-flavored tea." Yet you nod gravely. After all, kings never admit they're wary of temple gossip. Next, you're led to the oracle pool, a shallow basin of sacred Nile water. You stare at its still surface, while the high priest drops a lotus blossom and observes its ripples. Mainstream fact: water divination or lecanomancy was a respected practice in pharaonic Egypt, believed to mirror celestial movements. The priest's eyes narrow, the lotus edges westward, expect a message from Libya. You imagine your messenger stumbling through desert sands, sand-blinded and sunburned, a callback to that fragrant crocodile-dung sunscreen. One priest whispers. Historians still argue whether oracular pronouncements truly guided policy or served as political theater to justify royal decrees. You suppress a grin. Political theater today has nothing on this. Then comes the Frint Night rite. You're escorted at dusk into a hidden vault beneath the temple floor. Here, torchlight flickers off polished basalt walls etched with spiral glyphs. You recline on a slab draped in lotus petals, hands bound in linen strips scented with myrrh. Quirky tidbit: some scholars think the seals on your wrists contain tiny bells, jarring you awake if you drifted into an ominous dream, because nothing says divine communication like rabbit ear alarm clocks. Joke 2. At least it's better than waking up to a rooster at 4 a.m. Priests chant their voices, weaving a low hum that pulses through your chest. They dab a paste of poppy and mandrake on your temples, an early sedative to usher you into a trance. Historians still argue whether these concoctions truly induced visions or just gave pharaoh-induced headaches. As your lids grow heavy, images swirl golden boats drifting on starlit rivers, scarab beetles marching in formation and towering serpents winding through temple corridors. You know each symbol carries meaning, serpents for protection boats for the soul's journey, but it feels more like a cosmic slideshow than concrete guidance. A sudden tremor ripples through the chamber. One priest gasps. The gods speak. He seizes your hand, pressing a feather to your palm. The feather floats off. It's a sign of grace, he declares. You wobble but smile. This is your destiny, apparently approved by featherweight. Emerging into the night air, you think ancient TED Talk, but with more incense and fewer clicker slides. A palace guard hands you a scroll. Your dream foretells a festival for Bastet. In 2 nights, prepare the offerings. You squint at the hieroglyphs party planning by divine decree. Later, you convene with your chief priest in the solar courtyard. He places a shell in your hand and asks you to listen for the sea's voice, a form of conch divination called gastromancy. Mainstream fact priests sometimes use seashells to hear messages from distant gods, believing the sea resonated with cosmic harmony. You press the shell to your ear and hear only your echo, which you interpret as a call to introspection. Historians still argue whether shell divination produced genuine insight or merely echoed court biases. As dawn nears, you realize that being an oracle king is equal parts mystical communion and elaborate performance. The gods might whisper their secrets, or it might all be high-stakes improv theater, where you're both actor and audience. Joke 3. At least in improv, you don't have to memorize sacred hymns in hieroglyphs. You leave the temple's shadows with one foot in the divine and the other in politics, knowing every prophecy can shift allegiances, fan revolts, or justify another pyramid extension. Divine communication isn't just a royal perk, it's the pharaoh's ultimate power play, wrapped in incense smoke and spun with feather-light theatrics. You wake before dawn on the day of your coronation, the horizon still a bruised purple. As you trudge toward the great plaza, the air hums with anticipation and a faintly metallic tang, because nothing says royal celebration like fresh blood. Mainstream fact, Egyptian coronations often included ritual sacrifices of prisoners and animals to consecrate the throne, symbolically binding the new pharaoh's bloodline to the gods. Quirky tidbit. Some accounts claim priests painted your facial makeup using red ochre mixed with goat's blood. Historians still argue whether that was meant as protection or simply avant-garde cosmetics. Your procession begins with rows of bound captives, foreigners, captured in recent campaigns, paraded past the crowd. You grip your crook and flail, symbols of shepherding and authority, but can't help recalling that goat-herding tudo reel back in Section 2. Joke 1. If only you'd been tested on livestock management more thoroughly, you might have avoided those goat-related porridge incidents. At the plaza's center stands a sandstone dais, draped in white linen. Beneath it, priests have dug a shallow pit to collect sacrificial blood. You mount the steps in regal sandals, feeling the thud of your heart echo like a beating drum. A hush falls as the high priest steps forward, dagger in hand. With a ritual flourish, he slits the throat of a bull, its bellow reverberating against temple walls, and catches the runoff in a golden chalice. Mainstream fact bulls symbolized strength and fertility, and were central to coronation rites in Memphis and Heliopolis. The priest turns to you holding the chalice aloft. "Drink this," he intones. You raise an eyebrow. Wine was probably safer, But you sip the metallic brew anyway, swishing it before swallowing to show you're unshakable. Quirky tidbit. Some pharaohs reportedly gagged on the first sip, prompting priests to insist it was a divine cleansing. Historians still argue whether any ruler ever actually choked, or if it was embellished later to underscore divine favor. With the chalice emptied, a second priest scatters scarlet droplets onto your linen kilt, creating a ceremonial pattern meant to ward off evil. The crowd cheers, unaware that the pattern spells out your throne name in tiny hieroglyphs, kind of an ancient Easter egg hunt. Joke 2. Imagine if your Instagram followers found hidden hieroglyphs in your selfie captions. Suddenly, trumpets blare as a line of soldiers march forward, carrying alabaster jars containing sacred oils. You bend at the waist, while a priest anoints your brow, chest, and feet in increments: linen oil of Osiris, palm wine of Hathor, and lotus essence of Nefertum. Each fragrance blends into an otherworldly perfume, though you catch a whiff of fish paste someone accidentally mixed in. Mainstream fact: anointing oils were symbolic of divine blessing and healing, believed to link the pharaoh's body to the god's own flesh. Once anointed, you don the Neme's headdress, striped in gold and lapis lazuli, feeling its weight like a regal gemstone-studded helmet. A hush falls as the canopy is lifted, revealing your stately visage to throngs of cheering subjects. At that moment, a prisoner's shriek slices through the applause, a reminder of the blood price paid for your crown. You force a serene smile, because nothing kills a vibe faster than a reminder of forced labor camps. Next, you're led to mount a sacred white bull as part of the Union of Strength rite. You vault onto its broad back, gripping a braided rope. Mainstream fact: riding the white bull symbolized the pharaoh's dominion over chaos and order. The bull is led in a slow circle, and when you stay seated without faltering, it's taken as proof of divine favor. After a full rotation, you dismount gracefully, though you nearly face-planted into the dirt. Quirky tidbit: some pharaohs required a backup stunt double for bull riding to avoid public embarrassment. Historians still argue whether any ruler used a stand-in, or if it was royal propaganda to preserve the image of perfection. With that accomplished, the crowd roars as an enormous golden scepter is handed to you. You raise it skyward, reciting the coronation hymn of Upper and Lower Egypt reborn. Through Nile's flow, crowned by sun's fire, even the wind seems to hush at the sacred verse. Joke 3. If only you'd practiced karaoke this much, you'd dominate the voice. Finally, the high priest presents two live falcon, symbols of Horus and divine protection. You release them and they wheel overhead, their silhouettes sharp against the dawn sky. As they soar toward the temple spires, you feel the full weight of your new role settles into your shoulders. You step down from the dais, hands sticky with oil and flecks of dried blood, and the plaza erupts into a festival of music, dance, and buffalo meat skewers drenched in honey. Yet beneath the revelry simmers the truth: every cheer, every incense, plume, every drop of blood drawn today served to forge your mythic identity. The coronation bloodbath is not mere pageantry. It's a visceral demonstration that you, born mortal, now stand bound to divinity by the most unbreakable of bonds. As you're guided back toward the palace, you can't help but wonder if any god was watching or merely amused by the spectacle. You slip through the lotus-scented corridors of the harem's inner quarters, your sandals whispering against polished limestone. The air here is thick with perfumed oils and hushed whispers. Think backstage at a celebrity gala. If that gala involved dozens of silk-draped concubines and a ruler whose mood swings could reshape the empire. Mainstream fact: Egyptian pharaohs maintained extensive harems, partly to secure political alliances and produce heirs, with royal consorts often hailing from influential families. Quirky tidbit: some concubines dyed their hair with henna mixed with beer to achieve a deep auburn hue. Historians still argue whether the scent of stale barley improved the color, or just gave everyone headaches. Your escort, a eunuch in gilded robes, ushers you into the central courtyard, where the women gather by a reflecting pool. You pause, recalling the oracle pool from section 3, though this one holds sweet-scented water and floating rose petals. A senior wife, draped in azure linen curtsies with practiced elegance, she's rumored to have borne you 3 sons and an indeterminate number of palace gossip scandals. Each glance from her is a calculated chess move alliance, envy, submission. You smile and dip a cool hand into the pool, watching ripple patterns. Imagine if those ripples foretold who gets banished next. Joke 1. It's like musical chairs, but if you lose, you're sent to administer crocodile-dung sunscreen to border guards. The senior wife leads you to a shaded pavilion, draped with papyrus mats and embroidered cushions. Here the ritual unfolds like a dramatic preview of Pharaoh's Love Island. A maid presents a silver platter of pomegranate halves and frankincense-laced wine. You taste the tart seeds and swear they pack the same punch as that fermented goat milk porridge, except this time you don't erupt into spontaneous burping. Scholars still argue whether wine was a daily indulgence for royals or reserved strictly for sacred ceremonies. You take another sip, wincing as a hint of fish paste from Section 4's anointing oils lingers on your tongue. Your senior wife reclines on a cushion, her perfume rising in lacy plumes. She beckons you closer and you lower yourself beside her, careful not to crease your linen kilt. She traces geometric patterns on your forearm, with a reed stylus dipped in cold cosmetic artistry meets covert messaging. Quirky tidbit: some high-ranking consorts used invisible ink made from crushed garlic to leave secret notes on palace walls. If discovered, the smell alone was enough to reveal the culprit. Joke 2. Nothing says. Caught red-handed like garlic-stench espionage. As the sun filters through papyrus screens, your eyes drift to the alcove where the junior wives practice dance routines to honor Hathor, the goddess of love. Their movements are graceful, their anklets tinkling like distant bells. Mainstream fact dance and music were integral to palace rituals, believed to invoke divine favor and soothe the pharaoh's spirit. You find yourself tapping an uncoordinated toe. Remember that union of strength bull riding wobble from Section 4. At least this wobble is less public. A hush falls when a young consort enters, clutching a scroll sealed with the emblem of the Nile flood. She bows deeply and whispers that the annual inundation appears, a delayed an omen that rice yields might suffer. The senior wife narrows her eyes. The pharaoh must decide whether to sacrifice more offerings to Hapi or risk famine in the delta. Historians still argue whether allied families in the harem wielded real power over state policy or merely staged such warnings to curry favor. You listen, recalling your late-night trances from Section 3, and wonder if gods or gossip steer royal decisions. The senior wife snaps her fingers, and 4 attendants unfurl a canopy of blue-dyed linen striped with gold. As you settle beneath it, a troupe of musicians plays lyres and sistrums. Echoes from earlier temple ceremonies feel strangely comforting. You recline on cushions lit by oil lamps, scented with myrrh, the glow dancing across jewel-encrusted bracelets. A maid offers a soft feather fan. Each breeze carries the promise of secrecy and the weight of complicity. Joke 3. It's like being the guest of honor at a spa day hosted by your frenemies. The conversation drifts to palace rumors. A rival prince allegedly bribed a high priest to declare an ill omen against you. Another consort might be plotting to swap your pomegranate wine with henna-laced concoctions to embarrass you publicly. You lean in, voice low. Do they think henna wine will stain my royal teeth? A ripple of laughter echoes among the cushions. Protective superstition holds that the pharaoh's body must remain unblemished, so any cosmetic misfire could be construed as divine displeasure. You jot a mental note, increase palace security, or invest in royal dental cleaning. As dusk approaches, torchbearers arrive to light sconces carved like lotus buds. Shadows flicker across the marble floor, lending the courtyard an otherworldly glow. Your senior wife rises and presents you with a ceremonial lotus wand, a symbol of rebirth and purity. You accept it solemnly, though you joke under your breath that you'd prefer a plain shepherd's staff and a quiet life. Historians still argue whether such symbols truly cemented pharaonic authority or merely added theatrics to an already elaborate show. The harem's intrigues swirl around you like the scent of rosewater-soaked linens. Each alliance, each whispered prophecy, each carefully crafted gift or poisoned chalice reveals that power in ancient Egypt was as much woven through hearts and favors as through temples and armies. You rise mindful of your role as both spectator and participant in this perpetual court drama and step back toward the palace gate. The eunuch reappears to escort you onward, sealing the pavilion's curtains behind you like the final act of an eternal play. You pause at the threshold, inhaling the mingled scents of incense perfume and faint traces of bygone blood, an olfactory callback to the coronation pit. As the evening breeze stirs the papyrus fronds, you realize that within these silken walls, seduction and strategy blend inseparably. Here, beneath layers of silk and perfume, the future of a nation is brokered in whispers and wings, proving that behind every throne sits a web of ambition as intoxicating as any spiced wine. You creep through candlelit corridors toward the palace's subterranean laboratory, the scent of heated oils and strange resins thick in the air. Here, your royal physicians and alchemists conduct medical experiments that blur the line between healing and horror. Mainstream fact, Egyptian medicine was surprisingly advanced, featuring surgical procedures and specialized instruments, yet often intertwined with magical prescriptions. Quirky tidbit: some royal clinics use catgut sutures, actual feline intestines to stitch wounds, though historians still argue whether this was prized for strength or simply because cats were abundant. As you step onto a mosaic floor depicting Imhotep, the famed architect-turned-healer, a surgeon beckons you to a stone slab. You lie down, heart pounding as he retrieves a bronze scalpel the length of your forearm. Today's trial, treating a noble's infected arm with honey and natron poultice, he declares. You swallow, recalling the sweet but sandy texture of natron. In Newborn Swaddling from Section 1, Joke 1, at least it's not goat milk porridge this time. The surgeon presses a heated metal rod against your forearm, cauterizing around a small festering ulcer. Mainstream fact, cauterization was a common method to prevent infection and staunch bleeding. The smoke curls upward and you grit your teeth. Quirky tidbit: a few royal patients claimed that whispered prayers to Sekhmet during cauterization lessened the pain, though skeptics suggest it was a simple distraction. Historians still argue whether these religious chants genuinely altered pain perception or simply provided psychological comfort. Once the burn lines darken, assistants smear a blend of ground malachite and honey over the wound, believed to speed healing through the pigment's divine potency. You wince as green paste oozes into the cut. You'll thank us later, the lead physician assures you, dabbing the mixture with linen strips. Joke 2, you're banking on that, thank us later, being more heartfelt than the perfunctory court applause. Next, you're directed to the mummification demonstration table. A junior priest peels back layers of linen from a mannequin, exposing intricately wrapped limbs. We've improved our resin formula, he boasts, adding cedar oil for aroma and natron granules for dryness. You recall your salted bath from Section 1, mandatory for newborns, optional for rulers. Mainstream fact embalming techniques evolved over centuries, combining dehydration with aromatic resins to preserve bodies for eternity. Quirky tidbit, some embalmers slipped mini amethyst amulets into eye sockets to ward off decay spirits. Historians still argue whether these gems served a symbolic purpose or were simply fashionable. For your final trial, you stand before a seated anatomic statue carved of black basalt. The chief physician guides you in testing an experimental pewter implant designed to reinforce fractured bones. You press your right palm against the statue's chest, feeling the cool metal under your flesh. If the bone graft takes, this metal will integrate with your humerus, he explains. You picture yourself lurching through a battlefield arm bulletproof, but maybe a bit creaky. Joke 3. Metal arm implants might make for great royal selfie props, though the weight could ruin a dramatic pose. As you step away, a pharmacist offers you a concoction called Pharaohs Panacea, a potent mix of poppy tea and crushed lotus, promised to ease pain and bring prophetic dreams. You sip the bitter brew, waiting for that familiar mandrake tingle. Mainstream fact poppy-based sedatives were used in ancient Egypt for anesthesia and sleep induction. Quirky tidbit rumors suggest some pharaohs overindulged, leading to hallucinations of solar disk dragons. Historians still argue whether such accounts were genuine or later exaggerations to underscore royal eccentricity. Your vision blurs. Walls ripple like desert heat mirages. A nurse drapes a linen cover over you, and your world drifts between consciousness and fevered dreams. You glimpse scenes of temples collapsing and floodwaters rising, ominous images. Your physician insists are symbolic warnings, yet you wonder if they're side effects of too much lotus tea. When you awaken, the lab's torches have dimmed, and only the moonlight filters through a high barred window. Your arm throbs, and the honey natron bandages cling to your skin like a second garment. But the implant feels firm, almost comforting, a cold reminder of both innovation and risk. As you shuffle back up the stairs, you pass rows of jars containing pickled animal organs and dried herbs. Each is a testament to your realm's quest for medical mastery and a reminder that every cure carries a potential curse. You recall the scent of myrrh from Section 3's trance ritual and the incense from Section 5's harem. Here, the odors mingle with antiseptic vinegar, creating a pungent symphony. You step into the cool night air, grateful for your intact limbs, yet unsettled by the mingled marbles and hazards of royal medicine. Each experiment might save your life or end it prematurely. In ancient Egypt, the line between healer and alchemist was as thin as your natron bandages. And you, the patient king, were both pioneer and guinea pig. In a world where science danced with sorcery, you trudge past the shadow of the Great Pyramid at Giza, its colossal silhouette looming like a silent sentinel of stone. And you can almost feel the ground tremble under the weight of ambition. Here, your obsession with immortalizing your name reaches a fever pitch because what's a king without a monument that dwarfs entire cities? Mainstream fact, from Khufu onward, pharaohs commissioned pyramids as tombs to ensure their rebirth, with Khufu's Great Pyramid originally standing 481 feet tall. Quirky tidbit, some laborers claimed they ate bread made with powdered limestone to toughen muscles, though historians still argue whether this calcium overload made them stronger or just constipated. Before sunrise, you march onto the plateau, where tens of thousands of workers, skilled artisans, seasonal laborers, and conscripted peasants are already heaving massive limestone blocks. You clutch your golden crook and flail more for symbolic leadership than practicality. Joke 1. It's like trying to conduct an orchestra while everyone's playing a tuba solo. A foreman hands you a chisel to carve your cartouche into the central capstone model. If this prototype fails inspection, back to the drawing board. You pause to observe the ramp system, a colossal spiral of packed mud and stone, winding around the pyramid's backbone. Mainstream fact engineers still debate whether the Egyptians used straight ramps, zigzagging ramps, or internal corridors to haul blocks upward. Historians still argue whether the internal ramp theory holds water or is just an ingenious guess by modern scholars. You run a finger along the rough-hewn stone, thinking, I wonder if anyone else ever got vertigo hauling 6-ton blocks skyward. By mid-morning, you stroll through a staging area where craftsmen sculpt intricate reliefs and polish granite sarcophagi. You test a slab's smoothness by tapping it with a mallet, quaint callback reminiscent of your bronze mirror selfie practice in Section 2. Except now it's stone and you're less vain and more petrified. Quirky tidbit, artisans sometimes use pumice, mixed with animal fat as polishing paste. Historians still argue whether the fat was for lubrication or if they just liked the smell of cooked goose. The midday sun beats down mercilessly, and you retreat under a canopy held aloft by 4 poles, carved like papyrus stalks. A servant drapes wet linen over your shoulders, an ancient air conditioning trick that sends a trickle of cool relief across your skin. You sip a goblet of barley beer diluted with lotus juice, a refreshing callback to the Pharaohs' panacea from Section 6, minus the mandrake-induced hallucinations. Joke 2. At least no one's promising prophetic visions today, unless you count the shape of the next water stain. An engineer escorts you to a demonstration site where they test a wooden lever system designed to tilt blocks into perfect alignment. Mainstream fact, simple machines like levers and rollers were crucial to pyramid construction, showcasing the Egyptians' practical engineering prowess. You heft the lever yourself, your arms quiver as the beam shifts a 2-ton block mere inches. Quirky tidbit, some supervisors tied ropes soaked in animal fat around rollers to reduce friction. Historians still argue whether the fat was cost-effective or a royal indulgence in animal cruelty. As afternoon approaches, you wander among the worker camps, where tents of woven reeds and mud-brick huts line the desert floor. You overhear grumblings that quotas demand each crew haul 40 blocks per day, enough to build a modern skyscraper in record time if only deadlines were reasonable. Historians still argue whether these numbers are accurate or inflated by tax inspectors seeking bragging rights. You share a knowing nod with a grizzled mason who once carved your name into a hidden chamber joke. 3. Insider graffiti is the ancient equivalent of tagging your bathroom stall. A sudden breeze kicks up swirling dust, and you recall the goat hair brooms from Section 2's courtyard. This time, the dust is fine as flour, coating your tunic in a ghostly sheen. You cough, waving a hand to clear the air, and spot an elderly priest measuring shadows along the pyramid's base. He's calculating solstice alignments to ensure your eternal journey sails true. Mainstream fact, the pyramids align precisely to the cardinal points reflecting sacred geometry and astronomical knowledge. Quirky tidbit. Some theories suggest The shafts in the Great Pyramid point to Polaris and Orion's belt. Historians still argue whether this was intentional star worship or a clever coincidence. You climb a rigged ladder to inspect the workers hauling granite beams from Aswan each block, weighing up to 50 tons. You wince as they slow to a crawl, hauling on ropes lubricated with date syrup for grip. You recall the scent of honeyed figs from Section 2's feast and wonder if the sweetness doubled as a sticky hazard. You ask if any overseers ride sleds ahead to grease the path. They grin and point to men armed with bone-tipped whips, reminding you that incentives in ancient Egypt sometimes involved more fear than beer. By late afternoon, you convene with your chief architect in a shaded pavilion carved from a single limestone monolith. He unfurls a papyrus scroll detailing next year's expansion plans, a satellite pyramid for your queen, double the height of any consort's tomb before her. Historians still argue whether satellite pyramids served genuine funerary purposes or were simply status symbols to outshine predecessors. You tap your fingers on the scroll, imagining the endless lines of laborers and the hum of chisels echoing across the plateau. As dusk falls, you climb a small platform to deliver the day's inspection speech. Torches flare around you like captured stars, illuminating your profile against the vast silhouette of the half-built structure. You extol the workers' dedication, feign concern for their welfare, and promise a festival if the next block aligns perfectly. The crowd cheers, though you catch the weary slump in their shoulders. A reminder that ambition demands sacrifice. Under a canopy of desert stars, you linger beside the pyramid's base, tracing finger paint sketches left by masons in charcoal, a hidden gallery of daily life etched into history. You realize that the pyramid-making obsession embodies both human ingenuity and relentless pressure, a quest to cheat death by dragging mountains of stone into shape. Each limestone block is a testament to your drive and their toil, bound together in a monument meant to last an eternity. You descend into the workers' camp one last time before night fully claims the sky, offering a loaf of bread and a jug of beer to the mason from Section 1's natron baths. He raises a chipped cup in salute, and you sip quietly, tasting the grit of ambition and the sweetness of fleeting rest. As you trudge back to the palace, the pyramid stands half-finished, a silent promise that your reign will reach beyond the horizon or collapse under its weight. You slip through the grand gateway of your lakeside palace as torches flicker against polished alabaster walls, the scent of frankincense curling through the marble halls. Here, in these silk-lined chambers, opulence reigns. But beneath the gilded veneer, paranoia and betrayal lurk like vipers in the reeds. Mainstream fact, royal palaces in New Kingdom Egypt often featured expansive colonnaded courts, private gardens, and intricate water channels to cool the air. Quirky tidbit, some pharaohs imported live gazelles to roam palace courtyards as walking decorations. Historians still argue whether these exotic pets symbolized divine favor or simply served as mobile lawn ornaments. Your evening tour begins in the Hall of Mirrors, where bronze plates reflect torchlight in dizzying arrays. Servants dressed in linen kaftans accompany you, each carrying gilded trays of candied lotus seeds and pomegranate wine. Joke 1. Nothing says dinner with the boss like snacking on something that looks like jeweled bird droppings. As you pass under a painted ceiling, depicting nut arcing across the sky, you recall how you once practiced your God King stare with polished bronze in Section 2. Except now you're aiming to intimidate court factions, not just impress your mirror self. In the council alcove, ministers and military commanders convene under watchful statues of Osiris. You sink onto a cushioned throne, carved with hieroglyphs proclaiming your divine lineage. Mainstream fact pharaohs presided over daily councils, where matters of state, from grain distribution to troop deployments, were debated. A vizier in an ostrich-feathered headdress outlines a proposal to redirect Nile irrigation toward Upper Egypt's clay plains. You nod gravely, though inside you wonder if the plan will swamp the fields in mud. Historians still argue whether such irrigation projects failed due to engineering challenges or political sabotage. As the discussion heats, you trace the golden armrest inlaid with lapis lazuli feeling its cool weight. A senior advisor leans in, whispering that a rival faction has smuggled a forged decree, claiming you've sanctioned new temple taxes. You stiffen court intrigue is more cutting than any blade. Joke 2. No hunger strike is needed when you can starve a palace faction with rumors. You dismiss the vizier to verify parchment seals, sending a clear message trust, like the palace moat must be constantly patrolled. Next, you move to the banquet hall where long tables gleam with copper platters heaped with roasted duck wheat cakes and honey-drenched figs. Musicians pluck harps and strum lutes, their melodies weaving between columns like drifting incense smoke. Mainstream fact feasting was central to royal hospitality, and religious festivals reinforcing social hierarchies through shared abundance. A minstrel offers to perform a new ode, praising your resilience. You accept, but the lyrics feel suspiciously flattering. Historians still argue whether personalized songs boosted a pharaoh's image or simply inflated egos. You lift a crystal goblet of wine, tinted rose red by crushed hibiscus. Its sweet tang cuts through the savory richness. Quirky tidbit, some vintner's aged wine in jars, lined with clay that imparted a smoky flavor. Historians still argue whether this was an intentional culinary technique or an accidental fermentation side effect. As you sip, a cupbearer leans close. Madam or Majesty, be wary of tonight's after-dinner sake, date wine. You arch an eyebrow, thanking him with a curt nod. Court rumors swirl that someone plans to spike your cup with a slow-acting laudanum. You pocket a handful of salt crystals, an ancient antidote trick, and exchange a subtle glance with your head of guards. After the feast, torchbearers lead you through a hidden corridor draped in tapestries, depicting your ancestors' triumphs. You pause before a portrait of your great-great-grandfather conquering Nubia, a scene of chariots and pitched spears. Joke 3. If only that conquering required less paperwork and more roadside diplomacy. A whisper echoes behind you. Some say that portrayal was propaganda, not history. Indeed, historians still argue whether that campaign ever penetrated beyond Nile's cataracts or was merely royal spin. Your path opens into the moonlit garden, a private courtyard planted with flowering acacias and lotus ponds. Here, you once practiced trance rituals in Section 3. Tonight, you seek solace from courtly shadows. A soft breeze rustles papyrus fronds, and the moon's reflection shimmers across dark waters. You settle on a stone bench carved like a lotus blossom, drawing a deep breath as crickets trill in the cool air. But peace is fleeting, a hasty rustle by the water's edge reveals a cloaked figure, scraping at waterproof scroll cases. You slip into the shadow, observing a court scribe, copying your private correspondence evidence of betrayal. You emerge, cloak swirling, and confront the scribe under the pale glow. He flinches, sputtering excuses about divine research. You press a finger to your temple, an imitation of scarab charm rituals from Section 1, and demand the stolen scrolls. He trembles, offering only a fragment. My lord, they said you plotted to cut allocations for temple artisans. You stare into his sunken eyes, deciding whether to crush him for sedition or absorb the information to turn factions against one another. Paranoia coils around you like the serpent on your crown. Choosing discretion, you let him go with a stern warning tomorrow. You'll verify every decree in the Hall of Records. You understand that palace splendor demands not only lavish feasts and divine architecture, but also ruthless vigilance. Even the brightest torch can cast the darkest shadow. You step back into the moonlit air, feeling the weight of opulence and the thorns hidden within. The scented night air carries both the promise of serenity and the threat of treachery, reminding you that the palace's grandeur is as perilous as the desert beyond its walls. You enter the Hall of Judgment just as dawn's first rays slip through clerestory windows, illuminating rows of limestone benches where nobles await their fates. The air smells of polished stone and incense, a fitting stage for the pharaoh's most solemn duty. Mainstream fact pharaohs presided over judicial assemblies known as the Great Court, where they heard appeals, settled disputes, and issued decrees in the name of Ma'at cosmic balance. Quirky tidbit some judges use. Live sparrows released into the chamber. If the birds flew calmly, the accused was deemed innocent. If they panicked, well. Historians still argue whether the sparrow test ever influenced verdicts or was purely theatrical. You stride onto a raised dais, flanked by viziers and stern-faced scribes wielding leather-bound scrolls. A herald announces your arrival and the murmurs hush. Today's docket includes a land dispute, an accusation of temple theft, and a challenge to a noble's claim over a herd of sacred cattle. You grasp your crook and flail, symbols of shepherd and leader, and nod for proceedings to begin. First, a farmer steps forward trembling, claiming his neighbor usurped a plot of fertile delta land. He holds a chipped pottery shard as evidence. You lean forward recalling the grain levy debates from Section 2. Joke 1: modern judges have gavels. You have a flail equally impressive, arguably less practical for rap decisions. You question the accused who swears an oath on the Nile that he did no wrong. A scribe recites ancient edicts. Whoever moves another's boundary, stakes, shall forfeit 2 oxen. You decree restitution. Return the land and provide 2 oxen or face banishment. Next, a chant rises as temple guards present a trembling scribe accused of stealing ritual oil. The man's robes are smeared with palm wine residue and his hands bear fresh blisters. Mainstream fact theft of temple property was a capital offense, punishable by a severe penalty, reflecting the sacredness of religious offerings. You study the blisters were they from honest labor or oil, harvested at night. You glance at your own anointed hands. From Section 4, oil can mark you as king or convict. Historians still argue whether punishments were consistently carried out or sometimes commuted by royal mercy. You lift your flail and pronounce judgment. The scribe must serve the temple for 3 years to atone his forced labor, ironically mirroring the work gangs that build your monuments. The crowd murmurs. You sense their relief that mercy tempers justice today. Finally, high-born noble strides in sash embroidered with lapis and gold contesting inheritance rights over a herd of 10 water buffalo. His cousin, a broad-shouldered warrior, stands opposite, arms folded. Mainstream fact property disputes among elites often required pharaonic arbitration, underscoring the king's ultimate authority. You study both men, one's scars tell of skirmishes at Aswan. The other's eyes gleam with entitlement. Joke 2: in your realm, family feuds are less messy than palace intrigue, but only slightly. Evidence is scarce, so you summon the ceremonial scale of Ma'at, an ornate balance with feather motifs. A priest places a feather on one pan and the cousin's scroll on the other. You declare if the scroll outweighs the feather, the claim is false. If not, the verdict favors tradition. The scribe nervously transfers the parchment miraculously, the feather dips ever so slightly. You smile, pronouncing in favor of the warrior who bows deeply. Scholars still argue whether the scales were symbolic props or actual arbiters in disputed cases. As the session concludes, you rise, robes rustling, and intone the judgment hymn, I uphold Ma'at in earth and sky. Let justice flow as Nile's tide. The crowd responds with a reverent chorus, echoing your words like a sacred mantra. You think it's like hosting a divine TED Talk, except here, every slide can condemn or liberate. Leaving the hall, you pause at a sculpted relief depicting a pharaoh, weighing the hearts of the dead, an unsettling reminder that while today's judgments concern land and livestock, the same cosmic court awaits every soul. You touch the carved scales, feeling the chill of carved stone. Remember that sparrow test. It feels less whimsical now. As you step back into the sunlight, you sense the burden of dispensing justice. Each decree ripples through villages, temples, and tombs alike. Divine judgment trials aren't mere spectacles. They're the threads binding ruler and subjects in an eternal tapestry of order and consequence. Today, you wield law like a crook and flail, guiding your people toward balance, lest Ma'at unravel and chaos reclaim the world. You stride into the royal private quarters at sunset, the corridors hushed, save for the distant drip of water from decorative fountains, each drop echoing like a heartbeat in the silent stone. Here, family is everything, yet everywhere you look, ambition coils tighter than a snake. Mainstream fact dynastic succession in ancient Egypt was fraught with brothers, uncles, and even sons plotting to claim the throne. Quirky tidbit, some royal siblings hosted poisoned wine tastings disguised as celebratory feasts. Historians still argue whether any pharaoh died by familial treachery or if the stories were later propaganda to vilify rivals. Tonight's gathering is ostensibly a simple banquet among you and your 3 younger half-brothers, each born to different mothers, each eyeing your crown with practiced restraint. You enter the gilded dining hall where a low table is laden with figs stuffed with goat cheese, spiced pigeon, and fragrant honeyed bread. Candlelight flickers across jeweled collars and painted masks worn by the surfing girls, their painted smiles more chilling than comforting. Joke 1. It's like a family reunion with better catering and worse intentions. Your eldest half-brother, Amenhotep, raises a crystal goblet of red wine. To my great brother, may your reign be as long as the Nile's journey, he toasts, voices smooth as polished stone. You clink cups, probably not sodium chloride safety glass. Thank the priest for chemistry lessons in section 2 and sip. The wine is rich with a hint of cinnamon. You note no off flavors. Yet trust is as rare here as an unblemished lotus. Next, Horemheb. Your middle brother offers you a plate of roasted jackal meat, a delicacy reserved for royals. You recall the bull sacrifice from section 4 and the ostrich training mishap from section 2. You take a cautious bite, savoring the smoky flesh, then swallow. Mainstream fact-eating exotic or dangerous meats was both a display of wealth and an act of ritual significance, symbolizing mastery over wild forces. Quirky tidbit. Some courtiers believed consuming jackal bestowed cunning, though historians still argue whether anyone ever felt noticeably smarter afterward or if they just suffered stomach cramps. As the conversation drifts to border skirmishes along Nubia, your youngest brother Ramses remains silent, eyes narrowed on your flail resting by the table. Rumor has it he once plotted to replace your crook with a poisonous asp's fang. You can't help but chuckle at the absurdity. Joke 2. Imagine swiping right on Tinder and ending up with a snake in your pocket. The meal concludes with trays of pomegranate sorbet laced with rose water. You stir your spoon, thinking of that senior wife's petals in section 5. You smile politely at Amenhotep as he leans in. Voice low, "Brother, consider allowing me to govern the Delta. I've cultivated ties with the Medjay." You nod carefully, replying, "Your loyalty is noted," while inwardly parsing whether loyalty here means obedience or an invitation to rebellion. Historians still argue whether such offers were genuine proposals or veiled threats to gauge your resolve. Suddenly, a hush falls as a palace guard enters, bearing a sealed message. You break the wax seal, its emblem, a coiled serpent over a lotus, and unfurl a papyrus scroll. Your breath catches, it's a warning that someone plans to poison the palace's water supply tonight, using belladonna extract smuggled in wine jars. The messenger bows deeply and departs. You glance at your brothers. Amenhotep's eyes flicker. Horemheb's jaw stiffens, and Ramses presses his lips together as though tasting bitterness. You rise, summoning your vizier. Reschedule tonight's feast in the Hall of Records. You command quietly. Only allow trusted guards and the royal physician. Joke 3: Emergency wine tasting at midnight. Anyone? The vizier bows, lips twitching in that familiar courtly grin. As you step back, Amenhotep stands, face inscrutable. "Forgive the intrusion, brother," he says softly, "but the Delta's governors await my counsel. May I be excused?" You nod, offering him a slender dagger, an heirloom, more symbolic than practical. He tucks it at his waist and departs. You study the empty doorway in silence, sensing that every dismissal here feels like both relief and risk. Left alone with Horemheb and Ramses, you guide them out into the moonlit courtyard. Statues of Sekhmet loom overhead, their lion heads fiercely against the night sky. You press a finger to Ramses's chest. In the scarab charm gesture from section 1, once a blessing, now a warning. "Study our palace's channels," you murmur, "and guard the water jars." Ramses bows, shoulders squared, though his lips quiver ever so slightly. Horemheb inclines his head. "My brother, my loyalty is unwavering," he declares. Yet, you recall that time he challenged your chariot skills back in section 2. He was always competitive. Historians still argue whether Horemheb's historic reputation as a usurper reflects genuine ambition or was retrofitted by successors to justify rewriting records. You return to the throne room, the empty seats echoing with unspoken tensions. You sit and gaze at the twin statues of Horus and Set, symbols of harmony and discord. In your hand, the dagger glints faintly. The night is pregnant with potential betrayals, yet you feel the familiar rush of power. Every sibling is a potential ally but also a threat. Familial intrigue and fratricide are the twin blades at the pharaoh's table. As torchlight dances across the stone floor, you understand that blood ties here are more frightening than any external enemy. Trust must be measured in careful glances, whispered oaths, and perhaps a well-placed antidote under your pillow. In ancient Egypt's royal family, love and betrayal share the same linen cloak, only the wearer knows how poisoned it might be. You lie in the quietude of your private chamber, moonlight filtering through lattice windows as flickering torchlight casts dancing shadows. Tonight, you confront your mortality, seeking omens to guide your final days. Mainstream fact pharaohs employed soothsayers and dream interpreters on their deathbeds to decode visions as divine messages. Quirky tidbit: some scribes believed the twitching of one's toes foretold the approach of one's end, though historians still argue whether such talismans held genuine weight or were mere superstition. A nurse applies fragrant oils along your temples as you recline on a cedarwood bed, the scent of frankincense mingling with rose water. You recall the lotus-scented air of the harem in Section 5. But this is different now. Each aroma carries the gravity of farewell. Joke 1, it's like being in a spa. But the masseuse whispers your obituary table of contents. Your chief physician presents a small alabaster jar containing Pharaoh's final draft, a potent blend of mandrake myrrh and date palm wine. You stare at the deep crimson liquid, knowing it could induce visions or hasten the end. Mainstream fact sedative mixtures were administered to ease pharaohs into the afterlife, believed to facilitate communion with deities. Quirky tidbit rumors claim some rulers gulped it eagerly, hoping for an expedited exit from political headaches. Historians still argue whether frank confessions of intent were ever recorded or later fabricated. As you sip the draft, warmth spreads through your limbs and your vision softens. You drift into a reverie. Gilded palace halls dissolve into endless deserts, and you ride a celestial barge toward the sun. You feel the weight of your crown lighten with each step, each golden lapis segment falling away like petals. A dream interpreter kneels beside you, fingers tracing the mossied ripples on a silver mirror. Your dream of the setting sun beyond the horizon foretells a reign of peace, she murmurs. You arch an eyebrow, peace. After so much blood and sacrifice, perhaps the gods are toying with you. You blink the torch flaring as consciousness wavers. Suddenly, you glimpse a towering serpent coiled around the throne room, its jaws gaping. You bolt upright, heart-pounding, recalling the protective serpent imagery from Section 3. Joke 2, not the family reunion you'd hoped for. The interpreter gasps, noting the serpent's symbolism of transformation and rebirth. The gods grant you passage, she intones. You exhale, a shiver rolling down your spine. Whether from chill or prophecy, you can't tell. Morning light breaks as you awaken, limbs heavy but spirit surging. Your physician bows. The draft catalyzed visions, but spared your life, my lord. You have weeks, possibly months, to prepare your transition. You nod, acknowledging both mercy and warning. Your scribes are summoned to update your mortuary texts and pyramid plans. As they unroll papyri across your lap, you recall the mummification procedures of Section 6 and the final rites of Section 11. You instruct meticulous detailing of every resin layer and amulet placement determined to perfect your journey beyond death. That evening, you cross into the Hall of Prophecies, a chamber where golden lamps reveal inscriptions of past pharaohs' final words. You read Thutmose's admonitions against insurrection and Hatshepsut's pleas for her legacy. Each set of words feels like a whisper from beyond, urging you to choose your epitaph carefully. Finally, you return to your chamber, draping fresh linens, scented with cedar and frankincense. You run a fingertip over your flail and crook, symbols of life's balance and authority. Joke 3. If only you could inscribe "I told you so" on your sarcophagus lid. As you extinguish your torch and settle beneath a canopy woven with lotus motifs, you realize that deathbed omens and prophecies are equal parts divine communion and royal spectacle. Whether these visions herald true destiny or merely reflect the anxieties of a king, they shape the narrative that will echo through millennia. You close your eyes, ready to meet whatever dawn or dusk awaits beyond the veil. You descend stone steps into the embalming hall at first light, the cool air heavy with the aroma of natron and cedar resin. The walls are lined with marble basins filled with salt and drying linters, while shelves hold jars of myrrh, frankincense, and exotic oils. Mainstream fact, royal mummification was a meticulous multi-stage process, often lasting 70 days, aimed at preserving the body for the afterlife. Quirky tidbit embalmers sometimes inserted woven nets of linen beneath the skin to maintain the corpse's shape. Historians still argue whether these nets were practical support or elaborate superstition. You lie supine on a stone slab. Limbs bound gently with hemp ropes. A chief embalmer, his hands gloved in linen strips, approaches with a hooked instrument. Today's lesson: brain removal through the nasal passage. You watch, fascinated and queasy, as he inserts the hook and carefully teases out tissue in segmented loops, depositing each in a bronze jar. Mainstream fact: excerebration was standard in pharaonic embalmings, informed by the belief that the heart, not the brain, housed intellect. Quirky tidbit: some assistants claim the extracted brain was dried and used as a type of incense for minor rituals. Historians still argue whether this was actual practice or simply a rumor. Next, the embalmers make a small incision on your left flank to remove internal organs. They retrieve your lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines, each wiped with wine and natron before placement in canopic jars. You recall the royal medical experiments from Section 6. Now you're part of their ultimate trial. Joke 1. Who knew your insides would have better travel accommodations than you? With your torso hollowed, craftsmen pour more natron into your body cavity, feeling it like a ceremonial salt lamp. The substance saps moisture and wards off decay. You feel an odd dryness spreading through your skin as the salt works its magic. A young apprentice scuttles forward with scented oils, massaging your arms and legs to restore pliability. Mainstream fact: after dehydration, bodies were anointed with oils and wrapped in layers of linen to seal in preservation. Quirky tidbit: some embalmers added pollen grains to linens, believing it invoked floral guardianship. Historians still argue whether pollen aided preservation or was purely symbolic. Once you're sufficiently desiccated, the chief embalmer wraps your body in resin-dipped linen bandages, each layer applied with ritual chants to invoke protection. You lie still as the resin's warmth seeps into the cloth, bonding layers together. Joke 2. It's like a spa wrap gone right. Every fold conceals small amulets, miniature Ushapti figurines, meant to serve you in the field of reeds. Mainstream fact: pharaohs were interred with hundreds of Shapti figures to perform manual labor in the afterlife on their behalf. Quirky tidbit: some Ushapti were inscribed with their owners' to-do lists. Historians still argue whether those instructions truly guided spirits or were just playful annotations. As midday light filters through lattice windows, priests circulate around you reciting the Book of the Dead. Each incantation strengthens your ka, the life force that must survive beyond death. You recognize familiar verses from past temple ceremonies. Call back to Section 3's trance rituals, only now the stakes feel eternal. The embalmers pause reverently, bowing their heads, as elders place a final sacred scarab amulet over your heart. Mainstream fact: the heart scarab was crucial, replacing the real heart to deceive the scales of judgment in the Hall of Two Truths. Quirky tidbit: rumors tell of prankster embalmers slipping extra scarabs under linen to test new apprentices. Historians still argue whether any apprentice panicked thinking their master had returned from the dead. When wrapping finishes, your corpse is carried to an ornate bed of gold and lapis, then slid into a gilded sarcophagus, carved with protective spells. You recall the coronation headdress in Section 4. Now, even in death, you don the royal regalia. As your body is sealed, a final small jar of unguent is slid into your coffin, a last offering of nourishment for the journey ahead. Joke 3. I bet this is the only time a pharaoh truly enjoys being jarred. At dusk, mourners gather for the journey to the west procession. Priests chant behind lit wagons bearing your sarcophagus, while mourners beat rhythm on drums. Each beat echoes the pulse of life receding into memory. Historians still argue whether these processions scared tomb robbers more than deterred them, but they certainly made for dramatic pageantry. As the cortege approaches the burial chamber deep within the necropolis, the final act unfolds. Priestly guardians seal the entrance with blocks and amulets uttering the closing spells. The retreating echoes of chanting fade, leaving only silence and the scent of natron-laced air. You, the once living king, now rest behind stone doors, the ultimate testament to human ingenuity, faith, and obsession with eternity. You are entombed, yet your legend begins. Each sacred step of mummification, brain removal, organ storage resin wraps was both science and sorcery, ensuring your passage through darkness into undying light. As the heavy stones slide into place, you realize that mortality's final curtain may be drawn by mortal hands, but the afterlife stage belongs to the divine. You slip into the antechamber of your sealed tomb. Before the final sarcophagus is lowered, the air thick with torch smoke and the hush of stitched linen. Here the walls gleam with fresh hieroglyphs and painted scenes, each a talisman against intruders and a roadmap for your spirit. Mainstream fact tomb inscriptions often included protective magic spells from the Book of Gates to ward off grave robbers and guide the deceased through underworld trials. Quirky tidbit: some spells claim that a rat chewing on your linen bandages would summon Anubis's wrath. Historians still argue whether this fear tactic was practical or simply a theatrical scare tactic. A senior priest unfurls a painted papyrus scroll showing the sequence of Hall of Two Truths judgments you will face in the afterlife. You study each vignette, your heart weighed against the feather of Mayat serpents, snapping at your heels and rivers of fire to be crossed. You recall your real-life judgments in Section 9 and realize the afterlife tribunal is far less forgiving. Joke 1: at least in life you could grant 3-year temple service instead of outright annihilation. Next, the priest carries in a stone basin of the essence of eternity, a fragrant oil of cedar, juniper, and lotus, meant to anoint your sarcophagus lid. As he pours the amber liquid, the scent fills the chamber, mingling with natron's dryness. An olfactory callback to your mummification in Section 12. Historians still argue whether the essences were purely symbolic or seeped through the sarcophagus to nourish the spirit. You inspect the painted scene of the opening of the mouth ceremony above the burial niche. Mainstream fact: this rite reanimated the senses of the deceased, allowing the soul to eat, speak, and breathe in the afterlife. A young acolyte holds a ceremonial adze near a carved mouth on the sarcophagus, poised to touch the stone gently. Quirky tidbit: some artisans carved tiny flutes into the adze handle, so the tool itself would sing when it tapped. Historians still argue whether this added audio effect was ever actually used or was later myth-making. As dusk filters through narrow bends, you stand before the empty coffin, imagining your body laid to rest within. The priest offers you a final scroll inscribed with your declaration of innocence. I have not stolen, I have not lied, I have not slain the innocent. You unfurl it, seeing your name carved in golden ink, an epitaph for eternity. You nod, reciting the words, softly sealing your cosmic integrity. Then comes the moment of sealing. 3 priests, each, press a length of papyrus rope across the sarcophagus lid, one for life, one for death, and one for rebirth. As they tie the final knot, you feel the weight of all 3 destinies bound together. You shiver, though, whether from cold stone or existential dread you can't say. Joke 2: nothing like knuckle-whitening rope work to remind you of office deadlines. A guard steps forward, placing a bronze lamp beside the coffin. Its flickering flame casts a dancing glow on the painted jackals, skulking at the tomb's corners, gatekeepers between worlds. Mainstream fact tombs often featured guardian imagery jackals for Anubis cobras, for Wadjet to deter both spiritual and physical intruders. Quirky tidbit, some guards believed scratching at these images at night would awaken the depicted beasts. Historians still argue whether any guard dared try. Finally, the lintel stone descends, blocking the chamber entrance with a solid thud. You stand alone in the corridor, the only living soul inside. A final priest recites, "May your soul rise with the sun, unbound and triumphant." You bow, feeling the 3 millennia of kings before you lining up behind your spirit, each in turn weighed against that cosmic feather. As you turn to leave, you pause at the threshold and place a hand on the cool stone. Under your palm, you trace the faint grooves of your cartouche, freshly carved a callback to Section 1's birthrights and Section 4's coronation carvings. From the cradle to the crypt, your life has been framed in glyphs and sacred rites, each stroke a promise of immortality. You step into the corridor, its torches gathering as if in sorrow. Behind you the tomb stands sealed, yet the afterlife gates never truly close. Whether your spirit soars unchallenged or stumbles amid cosmic trials, your legend endures in every painted hieroglyph and whispered prayer. The tomb's curses and protective magic ensure that even in death you command respect and perhaps a little fear. You step into the narrow corridor, lined with antechambers, each niche flanked by painted guardians, jackals, cobras, and hybrid beasts, with lion bodies and human faces. Their silent watch feels less decorative than downright menacing. Mainstream fact tomb walls were inscribed with curses meant to deter grave robbers, often invoking divine retribution against anyone who disturbed the dead. Quirky tidbit, some inscriptions threatened would-be thieves with 1,000 scorpions in their sleeping chamber, though historians still argue whether any curse ever actually had a burglar's unfortunate demise to back it up. Before you lay the Chamber of Seals, where the final layer of protective magic was cast, a priest stands before an alabaster basin of cooled natron salt, drawing symbols in red ochre along the lintels. You recall the natron baths from Section 12 and the placenta burial from Section 1's salt plays, starring roles from cradle to crypt. Joke, one makes you wonder if any pharaoh ever sneezed mid-ceremony and accidentally wiped out the magic. The high priest steps forward, voice low, as he recites the curse of Unas. Whosoever enters here unbidden, may his tongue rot and his descendants be nameless. He gestures to a carved image of a man with a missing tongue, bound in chains, an unsettling callback to the fratricidal plots you witnessed in Section 10. Protective spells like these were mainstream editions of the pyramid texts, often included dire warnings reinforcing the sanctity of royal burial. Yet scholars still argue whether curses were serious legal threats or theatrical flourishes for elite audiences. A scribe presents a vat of scarab's glamour, a luminescent green glaze made from crushed copper minerals and honey, to be applied to amulets scattered throughout the tomb's corridors. Quirky tidbit embalmers believed that the glowing sheen would both illuminate the way for righteous souls and blind intruders. Historians still debate whether the glaze actually glowed in dim torchlight or was simply another pigment novelty. You watch as the glaze is painted onto tiny stone scarabs, familiar symbols of rebirth from Sections 3 and 12, each one a miniature guardian, ready to scuttle into spiritual battle. Next, you approach a recess, where 2 tall stelae bear incantations invoking Anubis, lord of the necropolis. A priest traces the glyphs with a reed brush dipped in coal and myrrh oil. Mainstream fact stelae bearing funerary inscriptions were erected to reinforce a pharaoh's eternal name, ensuring he would be remembered and so be sustained in the afterlife. Quirky tidbit scribes sometimes hid personal signatures within cartouche flourishes as an ancient autograph. Historians still argue whether any such hidden marks have been definitively identified. As the priest finishes the invocation, he plunges his hand into a brass brazier filled with smoldering cedar chips. Smoke curls toward the ceiling painted with the boat of millions of years depicting the sunbark's nightly voyage through the duat. You inhale the fragrant smoke, recalling the trance-inducing incense from Section 3's oracle rituals. Modern aside, you almost feel like you're back at that midnight ritual. Except this boat is permanently stuck in painted form. Historians still argue whether painted boats were ever ritually launched with water in miniature canals or remained purely symbolic. A chorus of low chants rises as 10 small statues of Anubis, each carved from black basalt, are arranged around the burial niche. Quirky tidbit: some artisans drilled tiny holes in the statues' mouths to allow incense smoke to issue forth as if the gods themselves were speaking. Historians still debate whether this was a widespread practice or isolated to a few grand tombs. You lean close to one statue, feeling the faint warmth where embers burn within. The high priest then leads you to a canvas of woven papyrus depicting the spell for opening the gate. Here the path through the underworld is mapped, showing each demon to placate and each portal to negotiate. Mainstream fact funerary texts like the Book of Gates and the Amduat provided detailed guides for the deceased, ensuring safe passage and triumph over obstacles. You trace a glyph of a lion-headed guardian with your fingertip, its stare engraved so vividly it feels almost alive. Scholars still argue whether these texts were public knowledge among scribes or closely guarded mysteries of the priesthood. Joke 2. It's the ultimate roadmap, minus the helpful rest areas and gas stations, replaced by crocodile demon ambushes and fiery rivers. But at least the papyrus is light. You move on to the Chamber of Whispers, named for the ritual of softly murmuring prayers. While walking its length, 4 priests form a semicircle, each holding a reed flute carved with hieroglyphic inscriptions. They begin the whispering litany, their breath through the flutes creating an eerie echo. Mainstream fact ritual music and chant were believed to invigorate protective magic, aligning cosmic harmonies with the tomb's spells. Quirky tidbit: some musicians tuned flutes to the pitch of temple bells to resonate with divine frequency, though historians still argue whether such frequencies were deliberately measured or approximated by ear. As the flutes waver, you feel the corridor's air hum like a plucked string, the sound waves brushing against your skin. You recall the gastromancy seashells from Section 3. This is like hearing the god's breath in stereo surround sound. Scholars still debate whether musical accompaniment in tombs was for spiritual efficacy or simply to intimidate trespassers. Finally, you arrive at the inner sanctum, where the sarcophagus rests beneath a canopy of painted stars. Here, the ultimate curse is pronounced: "May the earth swallow you, may your name vanish from memory. May your soul wander forever unanchored." The high priest drips a final drop of lotus-infused oil onto the stone lid, symbolically sealing the curse into the stone itself. Mainstream fact curses were an integral part of funerary religion, believed to enforce divine law beyond the living world. Quirky tidbit: some tomb builders incorporated hidden oil drip channels, so that any who linger too long would become trapped by slippery floors. Historians still argue whether such mechanical traps existed or are later fanciful tales. You step back, noting the interplay of art faith and raw deterrence. The protective magic woven into every glyph, every amulet, and every whispered chant creates a web more intricate than any palace intrigue. Yet you wonder, are these curses genuine shields or psychological weapons depending on fear rather than force? Historians still argue whether grave robbers were deterred by spiritual dread or simply by more practical measures like hidden doors and false chambers. As you retreat down the corridor, the painted guardians seem to shift at the corners of your vision. You brush your hand against a relief of Wadjet, the cobra goddess, her gaze forever fixed on potential intruders. In this blend of art and sorcery, the pharaoh's final fortress emerges, not in stone alone, but in the collective belief of curses and the potent fear they inspire. You emerge into the warm desert night, the curses echoing behind you like distant thunder. In the hush of the necropolis, you realize that protective magic is both a spectacle and a safeguard, a last stand of divine law against human greed. Whether the curses work by divine mandate or mortal psychology, their power lies in the mind's willingness to believe. You stand before the alabaster doors of your final resting chamber as dawn's pale light filters through narrow slits, casting long silent beams across the stone floor. Every hieroglyph here pulses with ancient intent, each stroke a promise of your eternal vigil. Mainstream fact funerary priests performed a 7-day vigil before sealing a pharaoh's tomb, ensuring all rituals were complete, and the king's ka, fully empowered. Quirky tidbit, some attendants swallowed small amulets before the vigil, so their dreams would be guarded, and historians still argue whether they suffered more indigestion than nightmares. A chorus of priests in linen robes forms 2 lines behind you, chanting the litany of rebirth in low rhythmic tones. You raise your crook and flail one final time, symbols of shepherd and judge, and stride forward to realize the tomb's ultimate rite. You remember the blood rituals of Section 4 and the medical trials of Section 6. Now your blood is spilled only in memory, and your body is preserved for posterity. At the sarcophagus's foot, a senior priest presents the Book of Immortals, its gilded pages inscribed with every spell you've spoken in life, from your childhood invocations in Section 1 to the divine judgments of Section 9. You trace a line of golden ink. Hail, O King, may your name endure as the sun. You inhale the scent of shell gold and ink, an olfactory callback to your coronation's golden paints, and feel the final gravity of your legacy. Next, you participate in the ceremony of duality, donning a double crown carved in miniature and holding twin scepters. Mainstream fact, the double crown united Upper and Lower Egypt, symbolizing the pharaoh's role as universal ruler. Quirky tidbit: some kings reportedly wore 2 crowns at once during the ceremony, one atop the other, and historians still argue whether this looked regal or simply ridiculous. You slip on the crowns with solemn grace, their weight a reminder that you carry 2 lands on your brow. The high priest pours a vial of lotus essence into a basin of Nile water, the waters of transition, and invites you to wash your hands. You dip your fingertips, recalling your inaugural baptism in natron salt back in Section 1, and feel a shiver as the lotus-scented waves ripple against your skin. The priests chant as water flows, so soul departs. As lotus blooms, so king reborn. Now comes the moment of eternal seal. A priest takes your hand and presses it against the smooth stone lid of your sarcophagus, imprinting your royal signet in fresh wax. Quirky tidbit: some signets doubled as miniature time capsules, containing minute scrolls of personal prayers. Historians still argue whether any signet's hidden psalms have ever been discovered. You press firmly, leaving a crisp emblem that will endure long after your voice falls silent. A hush deepens as the final gift is offered, a leaf dove, a symbol of the soul released from a gilded cage beside the coffin. It flutters upward, wings glinting in torchlight, and disappears into painted stars overhead. You recall the falcons of Section 4 and the sacred white bull of Section 4's union of strength. Now a humble dove carries your spirit skyward. The chief priest intones, "May thy soul soar beyond the sun's horizon, untouched by decay, unbound by time." You bow your head, feeling a profound stillness settle in your chest. No more rituals await, no more decrees to issue, only the opening of the heavy stone doors. The alabaster doors swing inward on hidden pivots, revealing the gilded sarcophagus cradled within. You step back, allowing the priests to lower the lid with reverent precision. The final strikes of a bronze gong sound 3 times, echoing like a heartbeat in the silent chamber. As the lid settles into place, you exhale, each breath a farewell to the world of the living. The gorgeously painted canopy above shimmers with gold leaf nuts. Outstretched wings welcome you into her embrace. You feel the weight of 3 millennia pressed gently upon your shoulders, the weight of history, myth, and human longing for eternity. You turn to the priests and nod, once a gesture of completion. They retreat, torches held aloft, chanting the hymn of rest. You remain alone, bathed in flickering light and sacred silence, poised between worlds. You stand in hushed stillness as the final echoes of the hymn of rest fade, each note dissolving into soft shadows. There is no hurry here, no earthly demands or clamoring voices, only the gentle rhythm of your breath fading into serenity. Imagine the world above stirring with the daily churn of sand and sky. Yet here in your tomb, time feels fluid and endless. As your heartbeat slows, the carved hieroglyphs seem to soften their sharp edges, smoothed by centuries of silent reverence. The painted stars overhead gleam like distant memories, guiding you toward the field of reeds where lotus blossoms drift on mirrored waters. There, the warmth of golden light will cradle you, each petal unfolding in a quiet celebration of your journey fulfilled. Breathe in the cool, fragrant air, laced with cedar and myrrh aromas that once marked both your birth and your final passage. Let the incense smoke curl gently upward, taking with it any lingering fear of the unknown. Imagine the protective magic woven by priests and artisans, settling over you like a silken shawl, comforting and steadfast. In this closing moment, there is neither triumph nor tragedy, only a tender release as your spirit lifts toward the sun's embrace. You are no longer bound by the weight of crown or scepter, yet your essence endures in every lotus carving, every sacred spell, every whispered prayer. Rest now in perfect balance and deep peace, cradled by the soft hush of eternity.